Hi everyone. In this module we've been exploring the concept of cultural programming and its role in shaping our values, our perceptions, our needs and expectations of others, and how that impacts our relationships, particularly in the workplace. I'd like to share perhaps a personal example using myself to illustrate just how profound cultural programming can be in shaping who we are. Once upon a time, I wasn't always Dr. Horowitz to my older sisters and parents. While growing up, I was Stevie. I was the baby boy in a family with two older sisters, mom and a dad, growing up in the South Bronx in New York City, Jewish culture in my family. And what did that mean for me? Well, it actually meant that I saw the world and was given messages that said, hey, you were special. You were someone who we needed to cater to, serve, meet every need, and make sure you were pretty happy. And for doing that, you only had one job in the family, and that was to bring home those good grades so mom could go, wow, you did a great job, I'm so proud of you. And while they all meant very well, no question about that, and I seemed to pretty much like those rules, they seemed to be pretty easy for me to get along with. I'm not so sure my sisters would say the same for them, since they were often the ones who, quote, cleaned up after their baby brother's mess. So what did it look like, just to give you a feel for growing up as Stevie in that South Bronx Jewish family? Let's suppose I'd come home from school in the early grays and run through the door, and there'd be mom waiting for me after school, big smile on her face and saying, oh, hi honey, I'm so glad you're home. Can I get you something to eat? What would you like, dear? I don't know, Ma. What do you got? Ma'd go down a list of her short order cook items or menu. How about a banana? How about a muffin? How about some cereal? Nah, what else you got, Ma? And Ma'd continue to go on until her little baby boy was satisfied. Well, this worked pretty well for a while, and still works pretty well when I go home, because the default mechanism to communication and behaviors are where you learned them. So it wasn't any problem at all, because everybody knew those rules, and it worked to some extent for everyone. However, little Stevie kind of grew up. And unless you're hit by a bus or some other tragedy, for example, you grow up and you actually move outside your family. And you interact with people along the way who may just not have had that same understanding of what little Stevie needed and wanted, and therefore made for a, shall we say, little more conflict in his relationships. Well, he did grow up, and at some point after school, he moved to the Midwest. Different city, different geographical area, different set of cultures, where he met his future wife, the lovely Onni. Now, Onni had a little different cultural programming than Stevie did. She happened to be the oldest in her family of 5 other boys. And she also came out of that Midwest culture, which had a very big emphasis on self-reliance, independence, everybody carrying their own weight and doing for themselves. You can see pretty early on how these two values by these two different people had a date with disaster, if you will. And sure enough, to use the same scenario of coming home, except this time as an adult, I came home from work with the same kind of expectation about being served and catered to. So conversation might have went something like, hi honey, I'm home. What do you got to eat? And expecting, of course, a response like mom used to give, which was, "What would you like, dear?" My wife, a Chicagoan, born and bred, responded with something to the effect of, "Whatever you're making." And so this, of course, to me represented a lack of caring, a lack of love. How could this possibly be? And the young prince was expecting to be catered to. Not the case. Now, what do we call those differences? Was Ani trying to be deliberately mean to her husband? The answer is not at all. She was simply behaving as the result of her powerful cultural programming, just as Steve was, even as an adult. The issue, of course, was these two sets of values were not only different, they were incompatible and ultimately irreconcilable, as in divorce. Now, of course, I hadn't had this course and had the benefit of knowing what was going on here. I simply behaved in a way that was comfortable, met resistance, and I reacted to that resistance with a display of anger and perhaps being upset, and eventually this conflict drew us apart. So I use this personal example simply to demonstrate how profoundly we are impacted, number one, by our cultural programming, how it shapes our values, which once we've got them, it is very difficult to change them. And there must be experiences or situations that are so motivating and provide so much self-awareness that they act as a motivator for change. And it wasn't until many years after my marriage that I learned through other experiences, other difficulties in interacting with people of different values, that I came to achieve that self-awareness, and with a lot of work and motivation, perhaps have gotten to a level where I can now appreciate difference and the need to accommodate and work at complementing people with different values than my own, both in the workplace and in my private life as well. So I share this just to show you the profound effects that culture and cultural programming has upon each and every one of us. So as you continue through this module and others that are to follow, we'll address some of the specific strategies that can help you gain that understanding, the self-awareness, and the tools for making and modifying your behaviors if they are in fact not effective in your interactions and your ability to form genuine, long-lasting relationships both in the workplace and in your private lives. Doc Horowitz wishing you well. See you online.